These events occurred 2 summers ago in the Grand Teton area. My boyfriend at the time, now husband, let's call him H, was an avid outdoorsman and also served in the military. I was an ecology major and just wanted to spend more time outdoors, so he decided to take me on my first backpack trip, just the 2 of us. For those who aren't familiar, the Grand Tetons are well known for their wildlife, specifically grizzly bears. My only experience with bears up to this point was watching a little black bear cross the road from the safety of my car. Seeing grizzly country signs around every corner wasn't really doing much to calm my nerves. My boyfriend looked like Indiana Jones, machete hanging from his belt, large knives attached to each side of his pack, and bear spray strapped to his waist. You get the picture. The beginning of our 25-mile journey was uphill. When in bear country, you're supposed to make a noise, as not to startle the wildlife by accidentally sneaking up on it. As you can imagine, going up a steep hill while carrying a 40-pound pack makes it very difficult to have a full-on conversation. We were an hour in, and almost at the top of the ascent. I noticed that the woods had gone completely silent, save for the rushing stream that was to our left of the trail. Silent woods are never a good sign. This usually indicates that predators are nearby. At this point, I was in front of my boyfriend, and we were about to crest the hill. For the past 20 minutes, we had not said one word to each other, having been too tired to speak. We noticed the silence at the same time, and gave each other knowing glances. I came up over the top of the hill and immediately froze. Sitting not 10 feet in front of me in the middle of the trail was a grizzly bear. My husband wasn't aware yet, as he was behind me, so I did the first thing I could think of. While still in my frozen stance, I managed to take my arm and start flinging it wildly behind me, trying to get H's attention. I was too terrified to speak. The bear went from sitting to on all fours and not looking away from us. He quickly swung around so that I was behind him, and he started yelling. Being in the military, he knows how to yell. But this grizzly wasn't fazed. As it started to walk slowly towards us, I was on the verge of passing out from the terror. The bear was around 5 feet in front of us when we heard a loud crack coming from the woods to our right. The bear heard it too, and then bolted towards the stream. A second crack boomed again, but this time much closer than before. H said, "It's probably just some falling branches," but we both knew that that wasn't the case. At this point, we were walking quickly up the trail in an attempt to create some distance from that grizzly and those strange noises. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up, and at the same moment, H stopped moving in front of me. He turned around to look at me, and I turned around to look behind me. To this day, we're still not sure what we saw. Back where we were just previously standing was a large black-brown mass. It looked to be 3 times bigger than the already large grizzly bear that we had just seen a few moments before. Its back was facing us, and then it stood on its back legs. It looked similar to a bear, but something about the shape was just off. At this point, it was probably stupid to run away, but that is exactly what we did. We were aware of heavy footsteps behind us, but neither of us looked back. Eventually, the footsteps faded. At this point, I was a complete mess. H was doing his best to console me. "Honey, this is extremely unusual. The bears usually stay away from humans. We're gonna be okay. I'm sure that won't happen again." That was enough to convince me to continue on this backpack trip. Not an hour later, though, we reached a clearing where we decided to take a rest and eat a snack. About a minute after we had sat down, I noticed the bushes moving in a line towards the clearing, directly towards us. Out of the brush comes this adolescent grizzly who looks just as spooked as I'm sure we did. But he came straight for us. H, being the crazy nut that he is, decided to charge back at the bear while screaming, "Bear spray at the ready." Thankfully that did the trick and the bear ran off. All I could think was just my luck. But that wasn't even close to what happened the second night. Before we began our backpack, we had let the ranger station know which trails and route we planned to take. With this information, they usually send a ranger on horseback at some point to check on you to make sure that everything is okay. There were not many approved trails left for us to choose from, and it was just our luck that they were the most difficult. Apparently, over 3 days that we were on those trails, we'd been the sole hikers. We did not see a single person once we were on this route. Anyhow, I guess somehow we missed the ranger who came to check on us, and we'd been following hoof prints the entire second day, and we hadn't seen any the day before. I had some foot problems, so we spent valuable daylight trying to adjust my boots, laces, and socks to compensate for the pain. When we started on the trail again, we had maybe an hour or two left of daylight, and in the woods, it gets dark fast. I was completely exhausted, and it was now dark out, and H was the only one with the working headlamp, as mine wouldn't even turn on for some reason. We needed to find somewhere to set up camp, and we still needed to eat. It was freezing and the wind was blowing. It was creating a howling sound as it rushed through the trees, which made it difficult to hear H or discern any other sounds coming from those woods. After another hour of hiking through the dark, we finally found a clearing. Well, it was more like a bowl. It looked to be 200 meters in diameter, with the sides being around 10 meters down from the trail to the bottom of the clearing. This place was strange, and we both felt it. Though he didn't tell me how freaked he was until after we'd left. There was no moonlight, so all we had was the illumination from his headlamp, our small camp stove, and the flashlight that I fished from my pack. Half of the trees were dead or fallen just inside this bowl. The vegetation everywhere else was very dense. To help alleviate my anxiousness, he started playing Ninja Sex Party out of his portable speaker. This didn't help much, as it just echoed off the trees, creating a dissonance of sounds. He also thought it would ward off any predators nearby. This is when we knew our anxiousness wasn't paranoia. The silence was back. There hadn't been a single bird chirp since we arrived at that clearing. It also might have had to do with the obnoxious music, but because of our previous experience, we decided to turn off the music and head into the tent. It was freezing, and as soon as we were situated in our sleeping bags, we heard deep cracks and thuds echoing from beyond the tree line. Falling trees? There'd been a lot of wildfires and very little rain this season. We both froze. That sound wasn't an echo, and it came from inside the clearing. Definitely not a fallen tree. We hear another thud. It came from right outside our tent this time, and we both stopped breathing. H's hand found mine, and we clung to each other, paralyzed. Something dragged across the front of our tent, making an indent as it went along. It was thin, almost like a finger. "What is it?" I whispered, shaking. I don't know. It shouldn't be a person. We're the only ones on this side of the mountain." I was trying my hardest to stifle my sobs, trying to listen what was outside. I could hear steps, but couldn't decipher what it was. The steps stopped, and then the whole side of the tent was pushed slowly inwards. At this point, whatever was outside knew we were inside. So I shined my flashlight the side of the tent. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was the shape of a human face pressed into the tent wall. I could make out the nose and open mouth. Each time they breathed, it made the tent around their mouth billow in and out. H said F that, pulled a Glock from his sleeping bag, and cocked it. The sound shattered the silence. The face pulled back, and we heard fast footsteps heading towards the edge of the clearing. We didn't leave the tent until the sun was shining the next morning, and the first thing we noticed when we got outside of our tent was the smell of urine. We came out of the tent and looked around. Whoever it was had peed on our coals we had left in the fire, leaving a disgusting stench of evaporated pee. Footprints surrounded our tent, circling around multiple times. Muddy handprints decorated the outside of our tent as well. Well, we think it was mud anyway. The takeaway? Wildlife is not the most dangerous thing in the backcountry. Around 3 years ago, I was visiting a family member who lived in Celebration, Florida. During the day, I took a walk around the town, and there was a very nice path. Definitely not deep wilderness, but wrapped around through the swamp. I think it technically was the Everglades, or at least it said it led to it. Super nice houses lined the opposite side, maybe 100 yards away, just separated by that pond. Fast forward to later that night. I headed to get dinner by myself and ended up throwing back a few drinks. I decide, why not? Let's take a walk down that path. So I start walking, and it was perfect weather, just overall a beautiful night. I continue down that path and get to what I thought would say was the most isolated part, but I could still see a few houses in the distance. I begin to hear something walking through the tree line 25 feet away from me. Just kind of get that weird feeling, you know? But it's the swamp and it's night, so whatever. I continue walking. I still hear that same movement, almost as if it was mirroring me. I got that same weird feeling again, just like something wasn't quite right. So I called a buddy from back home just to not be out there alone, telling him what's going on, and I decide I would just keep going straight, which came out on the opposite side of town, and just take the long way back. As I finally get across a little bridge to a cluster of houses, and boom, no more noise. But now, I have no clue how to get back to the house I was staying at. My phone's battery was getting very low, and the cherry on top was that it was 2 days before Halloween, so all the creepy decorations were up. I managed to throw on the GPS, and sure enough, it wants me to get back on the path, albeit way further down, so I figured I'll just be fine. I'm actually getting chills just thinking about this. As I cross the bridge and begin down the path, I immediately hear something pacing inside the woods. At this point, I am fully freaked out and just sprint down the way I know I need to get back. And whatever it was now also full on sprinting, right through the woods alongside of me. I'm by no means slow, and whatever it was felt like it was going stride for stride along with me. To get where I needed to go, I had to cross one more bridge that wasn't much longer and was through full-on foliage. I get to the other side and no longer hear anything next to me. It would have been impossible for it to follow, as the bridge was over a gully and some water. Just as I think everything is good, boom, Bambi is on the other side and nearly gives me a heart attack. It was definitely not what was making the previous noise, but man, I had never been so happy to see a deer in my life. My buddy who was on the phone could hear everything and didn't know what to say. I spent a good amount of time in the actual wilderness, and nothing ever even compared to that experience. Needless to say, I never went back on that path, ever, again. In 2007, I was a freshman going on sophomore in college, and my brother Martin was still in high school. We have two much younger siblings, so at the time, they were in elementary school age. My parents decided to take a cruise for their 20th anniversary that year, so my brother and I were voluntold to watch my brother and sister, Cole and Charlotte. My brother's best friend Christian stayed with us for a while they were gone, and helped us plan out fun activities for the younger siblings. One idea that they were particularly excited about was a camping trip, as my family had never been particularly outdoorsy in the past. Their eyes lit up at the prospect of cooking our dinner over a campfire and fishing in the stream. Since it was early summertime, we had the great luck of warm, but not too hot weather, and a beautiful clear sky for stargazing. Finally packed and ready for a somewhat long drive into the mountains, we checked into our campsite before dark, and Cole and Charlotte helped us set up the tent. It was strange, but there was no other people at that campground, which is kind of unusual for this time of year. Once we finished dinner, my younger brother and sister were ready for sleep. So Martin, Christian, and I stayed awake for a little longer, catching up and getting things ready for the next morning. Suddenly a white Astro van pulled up to the camping spot directly next to ours. He had dozens to choose from, but chose to park right next to us. "Oh well," Christian said. "At least we have some company now." He called out a quick hello to our new neighbor and got no response. I immediately got an uneasy feeling, but decided to push it aside and continued to get the fishing poles ready for tomorrow morning, and then put the food away for the night to ward off the bears and wild animals. Over the next hour or so, things started to get weird. The man parked next to us got out of his van to sit at the picnic table with only a small fire. From our roaring fire, I could see that he was looking directly at us. However, his fire died out completely several minutes later, and then he just continued sitting there. I could feel him staring. I could no longer see his face. He was just sitting there, breathing. Christian and Martin noticed that I was beginning to get uneasy, and they picked up on how creepy this situation had started to become. Martin then whispered,
"Why is he breathing like that? I don't feel safe anymore."
I told Christian and Martin that I was going to stay awake because I just don't trust this guy. As soon as they moved from the fire into their tents, the man rose from the picnic table and started moving towards us. I then called out, "Hello?" with no response from him. Finally, in a whim of panic, I demanded that we immediately pack up and get home now. Christian and Martin got out of their tents and saw the figure of the man just standing there, staring at us, breathing hard. We tried to stay as quiet and as calm as possible while packing up, as to not alarm Cole and Charlotte. Finally, throwing everything in the trunk, we drove away, not looking back. Before leaving the site itself, I asked if we could go to the check-in area at the lodge to see what the hell was going on, and see if they knew any more. What was this guy's deal? But to my surprise, there was no one even registered at the campsite. The story doesn't end here though. About 6 months later, I was in my sophomore year of school when a local hiker went missing in a county over from where we camped. She was doing something so normal, like just hiking with her dog. Sadly, she turned up several months later, murdered, and found in a white Astro van. When the news finally released photos of the van and the man's face, I knew it was the same man we saw that night. I got a phone call from both my brother and his friend. They recognized him too. We came to find out that this wasn't his first murder. Several years later, he'd been known as the National Forest serial killer. I sincerely mean it when I say that I'm an incredibly cautious camper now because of this encounter. Thinking that it could have been us or my younger siblings still gives me nightmares to this day. We recently had a reunion. Christian, Martin, and I were talking about what had happened to us more than 10 years ago. It's amazing that we all remember the details as they are all etched into our memories forever. So to the creepy, heavy-breathing, would-be serial killer, let's never ever meet again. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around at this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. Hey guys, gonna make this short because I'm gonna keep rolling along and making the next episode that I'm gonna have out for either tomorrow or Saturday, and that's gonna be Halloween related, so look out for that, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.